If we look at how much of this goes to the non-profit sector, we've made various assumptions here, and it is just an estimate. But if we start with the 6.2 billion, basically for the next bar, what we've taken away is the contribution of non-financial products and services, as well as the contribution towards local economic development, which is a lot of infrastructure spend. And then we get to an amount that is typically managed by a CSI department, and we estimate that that's around 4.3 billion. Now, each year, as part of putting together the CSI handbook, we survey 100 corporates, 100 of the large CSI spending corporates, and we ask them a series of questions in order to determine these trends. And one of the questions we ask is how much of their budget is channeled through nonprofits. And last year, the average amount that corporates channeled through nonprofits was 57%. So based on that percentage, we get to a rough estimate of 2.5 million going towards the nonprofit sector. The purpose of this slide, which is quite busy, is just to show that the corporate social investment spend is very concentrated. So on this slide, on the bar on your left-hand side, you can see the top 100 corporates, and we estimate that they account for 4.1 billion of CSI expenditure. In fact, the top 26 companies account for 2.5 billion of the spend. And you can see from the chart that 5 companies have annual budgets, annual CSI budgets of over 100 million rand. So where's all this money going? Each year, again, we look at which sectors CSI goes towards, and we found consistently over the 10 years that education receives the largest share of the budget. So on the left-hand side of this chart, you can see the percentage of expenditure that goes towards each of the sectors, and those red bars all add up to 100%. And on the right-hand side of the chart, you can see the percentage of companies that actually support those sectors. And that adds up to a lot more than 100% because typically companies support more than one sector. So we find that over 90% of companies support education in one form or another. So really the majority. And it receives 37% of expenditure. And as I say, that has been fairly consistent over the 10 years. The next largest sector is social and community development, which is quite a broad sector and encompasses a number of causes. And that receives about 15% of expenditure, as does health. We have seen over recent years certainly an increase in participation in terms of funding the environment. So over 50% of companies on the right-hand side now support environment, although it's still receiving a relatively small share of expenditure at 7%. So if we move on then to look at where does the money go in terms of geography. So this is the same chart, but just for the different geographies. And what we see here is the largest portion of funding, either because it hasn't been split out or because it is going to national NGOs, goes towards projects that cover more than one province, which here are defined as national projects. And following this, the distribution of CSI funds broadly mirrors the economic footprint of the country. So the provinces receiving the largest share of funds are Gauteng, the Western Cape, and KZN, which you would expect given that that's where the majority of businesses are based. However, bear in mind and thinking of the slides we've just seen on unemployment and some of the structural issues which are far worse in some of these provinces which are receiving fewer funds.